Did you know that Max Verstappen's telemetry at the Dutch GP revealed a detail that Red Bull tried to hide? Although he seemed to have the perfect car, the numbers tell a different story. What did the engineers discover that could change Verstappen's season? Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Max Verstappen arrived at the 2025 Dutch Grand Prix with enormous pressure on his shoulders. Not only because he was racing at home, in front of a crowd that idolizes him and expects him to always deliver victories, but also because his performance in the last 4 races had been far from his usual. The situation was even more delicate because practice was already setting off alarm bells. While Verstappen completed long runs with average times of 1 minute and 15.983 seconds, Lando Norris, driving a McLaren in top form, was clocking 1 minute and 14.970 seconds. That difference of more than a second per lap in race pace is no small matter in modern Formula One, where a few tenths can determine key positions. In other words, Max was facing a scenario in which, no matter how talented he was behind the wheel, it seemed impossible to match McLaren's pace under normal conditions. The Dutch crowd was euphoric, but inside the Red Bull garage, tension reigned. The team knew the margin for error was practically nil. Every setup decision, every change to downforce distribution, and every adjustment to strategy could mean the difference between giving their driver a chance at victory or condemning him to fighting solely for a podium finish. The curtain was set, Verstappen under pressure, Red Bull with aerodynamic concerns, and McLaren with the confidence of someone who knows they have the fastest car of the moment. The question was obvious. Would Max be able to turn things around with his talent at the Dutch GP? The RB21's telemetry data at Zandvoort revealed an uncomfortable truth for Red Bull. The car, once synonymous with absolute dominance, displayed a setup that sacrificed stability in favor of top speed. This meant that, yes, Verstappen was fast on the straights and could hold his own in attacking situations, but in the slower corners he was exposed. On a track like the Dutch one, full of tight turns and demanding traction on corner exits, this decision became a handicap that was reflected lap after lap on the timers. The most striking thing was the way the car reacted under heavy braking. In sectors like Turn 2, telemetry recorded sudden oversteer oscillations, meaning the car was literally moving sideways as Verstappen tried to hold the line. This behavior, in addition to costing him time on each corner exit, represented a constant risk of losing control. The fact that he endured up to 0.5 lateral G in those drifts demonstrates how close he came to extreme situations that could have resulted in an irreparable error. Another critical point was the analysis of aerodynamic downforce. By opting for a low downforce configuration, Red Bull gained a few extra kilometers of top speed on the straights, but that advantage was eclipsed as soon as the slow corners arrived. The outcome was clear. While Verstappen could reach higher speeds on the main straight, in each technical sector he lost around 0.6 of a second to the McLarens. In today's Formula One, 0.6 per sector is practically a given because no amount of talent can compensate for such a mechanical deficit under constant race conditions. Despite these limitations, there was one statistic that surprised even analysts. Verstappen managed to maintain a tire degradation rate 20% lower than his direct rivals on long runs of more than 15 laps. This is due to his extremely polished driving style, where every steering correction, every throttle pedal transition, and every use of the curb are executed with surgical precision. This ability allowed the Dutchman, despite the aerodynamic deficit, to maintain more consistent pace in advanced wear conditions, opening the door for him to fight for a much better result than the car was actually offering. The conclusion is clear. The telemetry showed a Red Bull fundamentally vulnerable, but at the same time a Verstappen capable of pushing the limits of a car that wasn't prepared to compete against McLaren on equal terms. The numbers revealed not only technical weaknesses, but also the greatness of a driver who knew how to compensate for them with his pure talent. This is where the difference between an exceptional driver and an ordinary driver becomes evident. While the numbers made it clear that the RB21 wasn't the most competitive car of the weekend, Verstappen decided not to give up and took his handling to an almost superhuman level. The start was the first great example of this. Max took a risk at the first corner with an overtake on Norris that bordered on the impossible. Not only did he gain position, but he also performed a maneuver that combined courage, reflexes, and absolute control of a car that, in theory, wasn't up for such battles. That moment sent a message. Even if the car wasn't supporting him, he was willing to fight with everything. Telemetry showed how Verstappen compensated for the lack of downforce with extremely precise driving. His fluid style, almost as if he read the track meter by meter, allowed him to minimize the tire's contact time with the Zandvoort curbs. This technique prevented the car from losing unnecessary traction and reduced degradation with each lap. What's impressive is that while other drivers were struggling with oversteer, Verstappen seemed to dance with the car, making minimal steering corrections that kept the RB21 within the limits of control, even though every corner was a constant challenge. Another key aspect was his tire management. In an unbalanced car, the natural tendency is to wear the compounds faster than usual, but Max achieved exactly the opposite. During long runs on medium tires, he maintained tire wear up to 20% less than his direct rivals. This allowed him to maintain a consistent pace, while other drivers began to lose important tenths of a second. It wasn't just about lasting more laps, it was about being able to attack at critical moments and defend positions without the car collapsing under the pressure of a competitive pace. The most memorable moment of the race was his save against Oscar Piastri. In a seemingly hopeless maneuver, the car went from behind and was on the verge of crossing the line uncontrollably. However, with an instinctive reaction and precise control of the brakes and throttle, Verstappen managed to keep the car on the track. That action not only prevented an accident, but also brought the fans to their feet, demonstrating why Max is considered one of the best drivers of his generation. What for anyone else would have been a trip off the track, for him was simply an opportunity to shine. Most impressive of all, despite the technical limitations, Verstappen transformed a car that seemed destined for third or fourth place into a solid podium finish, authoritatively defending second place against faster competitors on pure pace. This performance isn't just understood by numbers or telemetry data, it's living proof that a driver can change the fate of a race with talent, resilience, and an indestructible mindset. The most worrying thing is that McLaren was not only faster, but did so with a consistency that reveals solid work at the factory. If Red Bull doesn't respond with effective updates, the team risks losing the performance benchmark that has long belonged to them. This isn't a simple stumble, it's a warning that, in a long season, any delay in technical development can cost them the championship. Formula One is a war of tenths of a second, and at Zandvoort, those tenths were transformed into seconds that made the difference between fighting for victory or settling for second place. For Verstappen, the consequences are also psychological. The Dutchman is a born competitor, accustomed to dominating and always fighting for victory. Having to accept that the car isn't up to par can lead to frustration, especially when he knows that rivals like Norris or Piastri now have the equipment to beat him on equal terms. That extra pressure can become an emotional burden if results don't improve, and in a sport where confidence is everything, any doubt can make the difference in a driver's performance. Red Bull's immediate future after the Dutch Grand Prix is marked by one key word: evolution. The team cannot afford to stagnate while McLaren continues to advance race after race. It is already known that the factory is preparing small updates to the aerodynamic load distribution to reduce the understeer that so plagued the RB21 at Zandvoort. However, the big question is whether these changes will be enough to close the gap that currently exists. Because it's not just about adjusting a few tenths of a second, it's about making up ground that, in Formula One, can become a difficult mountain to climb if left too long. In the upcoming races, Red Bull will have the opportunity to demonstrate whether it truly retains the reactive ability that has so often characterized it. Circuits with faster corners could better suit the car's current setup, giving them some respite from McLaren's dominance. However, the more technical layouts will once again expose weaknesses in the slow corners if there is no real change in the aerodynamic concept. This means that each weekend will be a kind of test for the team. Will improvements appear, or will the drop in performance compared to its rivals be confirmed? For Verstappen, the immediate future also involves significant emotional management. He knows he's far behind in the title fight, and that his chances depend on Red Bull being able to react in time. His role will be to continue maximizing results in every race, even when the car doesn't give him the tools to directly challenge for victory. That resilience will be key to keeping any hope of a comeback alive. But even with all his ability, Max can't carry the weight of a championship alone. he needs the car to match his talent. What's at stake isn't just a single result, but the entire narrative of the season. If Red Bull manages to improve and close the gap on McLaren, it could put us back in a direct title fight in the final rounds of the calendar. But if the improvements don't arrive or don't work as expected, we could be seeing the beginning of a new era with McLaren as the benchmark on the grid. This transition of power would be historic, as it would mark the end of a period of Red Bull dominance and open the door to a change in the hierarchy of Formula One. The future, then, is not only technical, but also strategic and psychological. Red Bull must decide whether to take risks with more aggressive changes or settle for small tweaks that may not be enough. And amidst it all, Verstappen remains the central figure, the driver who keeps the hopes of his team and fans high, even when the numbers aren't on his side. The big question is how long he can sustain that fight without the support of a truly competitive car. The Dutch Grand Prix left a clear lesson for everyone. Red Bull is no longer untouchable. RB21 telemetry revealed that the team sacrificed too much in its bid for top speed and, as a result, lost crucial ground in the slow corners to McLaren. Surprisingly, despite these limitations, Verstappen secured a second-place finish thanks to perfect driving, proving once again that his talent remains Red Bull's greatest strength at the moment. The result was not a product of the car, but of the driver. What seemed like a simple technical detail turned into a serious warning. If Red Bull doesn't find quick solutions, it risks seeing McLaren consolidate its position as the new benchmark in Formula One. Every 10th loss today can translate into decisive points tomorrow, and that accumulation of results could define the course of the championship long before the final race. In other words, the battle is no longer fought solely on the track, but also in the engineering labs where the parts that will make the difference are designed. For Verstappen, the conclusion is even more complex. On the one hand, he demonstrated that he is capable of pushing the limits and keeping his team in the fight even in adverse conditions. But on the other, it was also clear that even his extraordinary skill won't be able to sustain him forever if the car doesn't evolve to McLaren's level. That's the harsh reality of Formula One. The driver's talent is decisive, but the machine must keep up. And right now, Max needs Red Bull more than ever to give him a car that matches his ambition. Now the question is inevitable. Will Max's talent be enough to keep the dream alive, or are we witnessing the end of an era of dominance? Leave me your opinion in the comments, because your perspective is also part of this debate. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.